Hello, everybody. This is Ryan. Just wanted to put out a quick disclaimer before this episode plays. We talk about something the Japanese Prime Minister said during a segment in the episode, and what we talk about was incorrect information. So it was said that the Japanese Prime Minister was basically decrying Assassin's Creed Shadows as a whole because of its in how it incorrectly portrays Japan, basically, and that he took issue with the game as a whole. And that statement was not correct. His actual statement was regarding the ability to deface shrines and temples and destroy important landmarks in the game. And that was what he took issue with because he didn't want tourists to think that that was okay or something along those lines. And Ubisoft has actually patched that out. So, from what I understand, you cannot do that anymore. But that was the statement he made and what he took issue with. So I just wanted to say that before you watch. We were incorrect in that discussion, but just wanted to get the right information out there. Thank you. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Convince Me podcast, where we're on a mission to convince you to step outside of your gaming comfort zone and try something new. Let's get to convincing. Welcome back, everybody. I am Darren. This is Ryan. And if you may remember, last week we tried to convince each other to play the games Brotato and Turnip Boy Robs a Bank. So we're deep into our suffering depression times with root vegetables, trying to convince each other that specific media were worth playing. And I, for one, was definitely interested in Brotato because I have been for a very long time. I believe,
I
Ryan, you
was
were
I was convinced.
persuaded.
However, so I'm in between, technically in between games. If you look at our TikTok, I'm talking about my Monster Hunter journey, but it's really a filler between now and
Hmm.
when Clair Obscure comes out. So I do have time to play it. However, I haven't because I want to play Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion before I go play Robs the Bank, and that's just more game that I it's the kind of game where I would like to really sit down and dedicate time to, even though I know I don't have to, but I want to fully enjoy it. So that's really the only reason I haven't yet.
Which, I mean, that's perfectly understandable. We're in this weird time in between games that we've been really excited about for a while. With other relevant games coming out, I mean, Xenoblade just came out.
Mm-hmm.
Assassin's Creed Shadows,
We'll
which
talk about
you know,
that in a
we'll
little bit.
we'll talk about that in a bit. And somewhere in the meantime, we've had to find time to play these lovely games that we've decided to persuade each other about this week. In today's episode, for the first time, of Convince Me to Go Back, where Ryan and I have decided to play old games from previous consoles that we never had a chance to experience when we were younger, whether that's purely just because we were younger and didn't have access to money to go buy our own games, or because if for whatever reason we didn't have these consoles. Now, this is not the case really almost ever, because I think we've had almost every, if not every, console that's come out probably since 2000. I don't think that's
Barring
absurd to
handhelds,
say.
like barring very specific handhelds, I think it's safe to say that, yeah, we've pretty much had everything that's released. I would
Hmm.
say,
I think I have had everything.
yeah, because you
'Cause I
got the
think all you're
Vita.
missing is a Vita. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and like the Nokia Engage, but like,
Yeah, but that was a phone. We can leave that one off to the side.
I wanted one, but
And
never got it.
yeah, I didn't, to be honest. I saw one in a GameStop display once, and it looked the most cumbersome thing I'd ever seen, that I couldn't even begin to justify it even a little bit, and it never sparked my interest in the slightest. I mean, this was in the time, of course, where Blackberries had that stupid little trackball. and the sidekick was going crazy, and Chirp existed. And
Got a
if
very,
anybody's
very
under the age of 25 listening to this, you have no idea what I'm talking about, because chances are your parents had one of these. Odds are.
one of my closest friends, basically my brother, was a sidekick apologist. Like if he had it his way, he would still have his sidekick to this day, and I don't blame him. For those who don't know, sidekick was a phone, but the screen you could flip it and it would reveal a keyboard, because before we had touchscreen keyboards, the whole rage was physical keyboards. I was one of those. Every phone I had
Hmm.
since the Droid. For those who remember the Droid, it had to have a
Mm.
physical keyboard because you were so cool if you didn't have to do T9 typing.
Was even before then, because we had the Envy and the NV2 before then.
That's fair. That's fair. But we're not here to talk about phones. We're here to talk about
We're
games.
not.
And both of our games are, obviously, older. Uh,
Hmm.
my issue with Xbox is that their naming convention for their consoles make it so confusing. Like with PS5, I could be like, oh, this is a PS2 game. It was 3 generations ago or four, whatever. With Xbox, it's like I have to go, okay, 360, then one, and then series, and then like I get confused. Even though if I really sit down and think, I can remember. But anyway, my game this week is a 360 game. Darren's is an Xbox game. But it's funny that we are playing these games on Game Pass because the question of the week ties into Games Pass. And the question is, it seems as though Microsoft is potentially leaving the console race and focusing mainly on Game Pass because there's news, rumors, and things like that the next Xbox is going to be just pretty much a computer you plug directly into your TV. It's not going to be necessarily a whole Xbox console. It's just going to be essentially a Game Pass machine. So if Microsoft goes the route of just a Game Pass machine, who would we be interested in being taking Microsoft's place essentially in the console race? Because typically we have three consoles vying for the top. Who would we want to compete with Nintendo and Sony?
So I mean, the obvious answer is obvious, right? I feel like we're long overdue for
Atari.
a new Sega console, of course. But I've been thinking about that more and more, and I think about the gaming landscape as a whole, and how Sega has really kind of just refined itself to being a few different game IPs,
Yep.
and is much less the technological powerhouse that it was in the 90s, early 2000s architecture of just what we know technology to be. And so I'm here to actually pose a very different idea, which is to say that if Microsoft does decide to drop out of consoles entirely, I actually think what we will see happen is the only console that will truly exist as a console as we know it now will be PlayStation. And I think that they may refine themselves to be just more of what they've always been. They'll stick to the IPs that they have, but with the fact that so many PlayStation games are going to Steam, that takes away a lot of the concept of exclusivity. So what I actually see is I see PlayStation and Sony being its own proprietary thing. So maybe that's the only console that we have, whereas Nintendo decides to stick with its route of accessibility in like the quasi, let's call it a transitional handheld idea of like what the Switch is, or potentially falling back into what is perhaps the greatest selling console of all time, but the Nintendo DS. So perhaps they lean back into that and go more for the accessibility route rather than these, big sexy titles with expensive graphical designs, and really focusing on what Nintendo has always done, arguably better than what any other gaming company has ever done, which is that they have really mastered the experience of every one of their games.
But isn't Nintendo isn't that still a console, whether it's accessibility or whatever? Because like 3DS, DS, SP, those were consoles. They're just
Sure.
handheld consoles. So are you saying that as far as I'm not sure what you're getting at, because like Switch
I'd say.
it transitions between handheld TV, but
Mhm.
it's you still plug it into your TV to play it.
I'm saying, but see, they've never tried to compete power wise with the current gen.
No,
And they haven't really ever, except for
although
maybe the Nintendo 64. We could make the
I'd
argument.
say
GameCube
GameCube.
to a lesser extent,
Yeah.
but I think the specs were just so level of a playing field back then because the technology as we know it now was just so expensive to manufacture that it was easier to do then. But as of the generation where we got the Wii, the 360, and the PS3, the schism that formed in we'll call graphical fidelity and quality was just massive. And so I think we see Nintendo really focus more on the experience rather than trying to dump, the highest end gaming PC hardware because that's not it just they don't need it for what the kinds of games they've always made, but what they do is they put a lot of emphasis one on things being fun, which we can never take away from them. But two, they want these innovative play together experiences with all of their biggest titles. Every giant Nintendo title you can think of and I can think of is to some extent something you are supposed to experience with other people. And I could see them leaning more into that and away from this concept of the console race, which in a lot of ways they haven't really been a part of and yet still vastly outshine everybody because they stick to what they're good at. Whereas
Interesting.
Microsoft and Sony were going like head to head in the power battle of whose games look better, what titles do you have. Nintendo just stands over there and goes, "We're gonna put Sora into Smash," and everyone loses their damn minds
Dude,
because all of us.
I think I actually
I
wept.
know, I know.
Not because of how excited I was, just because I was like, oh my gosh, Sora.
I know, I know. And Cloud and Sephiroth and Byleth and like everyone that we've had access to is just it shows where their focus is, and they focus on bringing people together and giving you these incredible experiences that you can share with other people. Whereas it kind of feels like we may be moving in that direction with Nintendo, whereas Microsoft and Sony are let's make powerful stuff. There's so much attention being taken away from these beautiful first person well excuse me one player adventure titles because everything seems to have a multiplayer mode in some way now to maintain its semblance of relevance, which I absolutely hate.
We're gonna talk about
I
that later.
love good because I love one player games. That's one of the biggest things that I enjoy doing is immersing myself in that story, and just the attention has been so vastly taken away from that I can see that being where the split happens.
Interesting. So yeah, I was thinking semantically because Nintendo like they make a console, but you're saying
Sure.
as far as a competitive market, Nintendo is its own.
Yeah.
People know Nintendo. Like kids,
Hmm.
my every student in my school who has seen a game knows Nintendo.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's fair. My answer is Sega, and here's why I say
Of course.
that. One, they have the pedigree for it, and that that pedigree led them to creating a console that was so far ahead of its time. I
Hmm.
mean, you sit there and you look at the Dreamcast, which I don't want to look like an idiot, but I'm 99% sure that was the last console they ever did. But the
Hmm.
Dreamcast had you could plug your Ethernet in and play online, and you had access to an actual internet, and you could check your email on it. And like PS2 you had an
Hmm.
attachment that you could get to do online multiplayer, but Dreamcast it had it built in, and you could straight up browse the internet, and it was a modem, and
Hmm.
you had these memory cards that you could insert that in and of themselves were their own game, and you had graphically it was really really well. It was the games looked great at the time compared to everybody else. Like it was so far ahead of its time that I I'd have to do some digging into what actually happened, but I think what happened was they basically flew too close to the sun. I think the amount they were charging and the amount of consoles that they made, so the consoles weren't selling because they were too expensive and they made so many, so it
Mm-hmm.
financially messed them up. I think that's what happened. Could be wrong, but I think that Sega has iconic characters that if we wanted to do first party exclusives, that they could do that. Obviously, you have Sonic. Like Sonic, that's your go-to, but you can't forget games like friggin' Vector Man. Don't you dare sleep on Vector Man, alright? Don't you sleep on these games that they have access to. The only first party issues potentially come in is because now Mario and Sonic are almost so intertwined because you have Mario and Sonic at the Olympics and all these other games, and it's like, ugh, Sega comes out with this thing, how are we gonna separate them or whatever? So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff that's up in the air, but I think that Sonic could, or Sega, geez, they're interchangeable for me. Sega could get a foot in the door. I just think that the only issue they could run into is that their properties are so all over because,
Mm-hmm.
like, although not, yeah, I mean, Sonic Mania was released on PlayStation, maybe Xbox, and Switch. So now you have these other companies that have some ownership of Sonic or some rights to Sonic or whatever. So what do you do with that? Is that a contract where you have a certain amount of time? I don't know. But out of all the companies that exist, I feel like it's got to be Sega.
I would agree, but I'm gonna throw one thing at you because I just looked it up
Okay.
because I didn't know this
Oh.
offhandedly because
Oh.
I was a single digit year old when this happened. Okay,
Okay.
the U.S. market launch price of a Sega Dreamcast in September of 1999 was $199. One more time, $199 for a Sega Dreamcast in 1999. Conversely, the US market PlayStation 2 launch price in the following March, so that's March of the year 2000, was $299.
So then, was the issue that they made too
So
many of them and they didn't sell
I
them?
think I think what it became, maybe, but I think what we may have seen was just that they lacked the big titles to keep them floating. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Let's caveat. I don't know. But I think they may have just lacked the power to continue generating what they did because at the time, right, you have PlayStation. When PlayStation 2 came out, well really when PlayStation 1 came out was the first time we saw Final Fantasy switch from Nintendo to Sony.
Right.
So now all of a sudden PlayStation has Final Fantasy, one of the largest at the time franchises in the world. Nintendo's always been Nintendo, so we never have to worry about that. But Sega was basically trying to lean on, well, we have Sonic Adventure, we have Sonic Adventure 2, we have Crazy Taxi, which people
Ah,
like,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah. I will
which was great, but
never
great. But
forget that.
how many people do you know who actually played Jet Set Radio? It's not a lot. How many people do you know who really played and enjoyed Parappa the Rapper? It's not that much.
That
And
was
as
that was
good as it
PlayStation though.
was it? I thought it was
I think
Dreamcast.
so. It might have been both. I don't
I
know.
don't know. Fact check. But the big thing, right? And I think if we could go back now with every bit of knowledge we have then, Power Stone would have carried that franchise or would have carried
That
Sega's
game is
consoles.
so expensive
Power
now.
Stone is incredible. It was one of the greatest. If people who are listening aren't familiar, Power Stone was your original like arena fighter where you could go and pick up power ups and you could do ultimates. So think what the like MOBA genre has become. I could honestly say may well have been a lot of people who grew up playing things like Power Stone in order for things like MOBAs or um,
Yeah.
I guess really just MOBAs to
Yeah.
be as they are now.
like arena
Um,
fighters and things like that.
right. So
Yeah.
I think maybe it was a titles thing. It's hard to say, but I mean, obviously Sega makes the most sense, and now we're really leaning back into Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo, and that's just been the crux of everything for a while. And I want to come back to Microsoft because that brings me to my game of the week, which I want to go ahead and just rip the band-aid off on, because I played Blinx the Time Sweeper, which was developed. Yes, developed.
I believe it was developed.
It was published by Microsoft Game Studios. It was developed by Artoon.
Yeah.
And this was, of course, an original Xbox game. And if there is anyone listening who has never seen an original Xbox, first of all, still to this day, to me, one of the coolest looking consoles that ever came out.
It was so
Just
big.
this giant box with a big old X on top and a neon obnoxious green circle. And like I remember it to this day, I remember opening that present on Christmas. And when I was growing up, my grandmother used to put clues on my presents so that I could
Ooh.
like satiate my curiosity a little bit and try to guess what was inside. And they were the most convoluted, nonsensical clues, which will make a lot of sense to you for why my brain now works the way it does. But the clue on that present was 24. The number 24. Now, Ryan, if I told you that and you now know that it was an Xbox, why would you say 24 was a clue?
Jack Bauer. Um,
Wrong. That didn't exist in the year 2000. Good try. 2001. 2001. Time's up. It is because X is the 24th letter of the alphabet.
oh, okay.
So we opened this, and now we have the Xbox where we had launch titles like the original Halo Combat Evolved, Project Gotham Racing, which still to this day was one of the most fun experiences, though I can't imagine it holds up well. Let's fast forward a year later. 1 year later.
With the big old Chungus controller.
So the Xbox was released in on November 15th, 2001, which coincidentally was my grandmother's birthday, so it's all kind of a full circle thing.
Nice.
October 8th, 2002, we are met with really a pretty early first party title for Microsoft in Blinx the Time Sweeper. And in Blinx the Time Sweeper, you are a cat who lives in this society of cats who seem to be responsible for the orienting of time and giving it to planets in order for them to function. And it's one of those games where there's voice acting, but it's not in an actual language.
Oh, it's
So you're met with this
like
sense of
Simlish,
garbles. Think like Simlish, yeah, exactly,
or
or
Animal
like
Crossing.
any odd world game, like Munch's Odyssey, Abe's Odyssey,
Yeah.
whatever. So you're met with that, and you see this giant news bulletin that comes on the giant like Times Square jumbotrons, where there's this band of pirates who is stealing people's time and turning it into time dust or some nonsense like that. Oh, but don't worry. There's the obligatory girl who says, "No, don't worry about me. You don't have to save me. Just make sure they don't hurt anybody." And so, of course, Blinx, being the heroic cat he is, jumps into the portal to that planet to save the obviously human girl. Because why wouldn't the cat person save the obvious human girl? And you're brought into your zone, and this, again, mind you, we're back in early 2000s, so the
Get in the
entirety of
zone.
the game is levels based.
Okay.
So you play through the level, complete your objective, move on to next level. You are pretty much the only thing you have at your disposal is a vacuum that lets you suck up debris and spit said debris at the enemies. You pick up symbols, and if you match three symbols, you can only pick up four at a time. And if three of them match in a row, you gain power, which you can use to either stop time, rewind time, fast forward time, which you can use to affect enemies and the way that they interact with the world.
So like a convoluted Prince of Persia Sands of Time.
Yes, which is funny to say convoluted because it would have come out right around the same time. So there we
Respect.
are. Um, let's fall back one more time with a bit of nostalgia for the kids. You recall the glory of the Xbox controller.
The Duke. If for those who've
The
never seen it,
Duke.
look up Xbox the Duke controller and just be mystified at how a company made such an unruly controller.
I even had a third party controller, which was somehow larger.
I refuse.
Giant green, like it's like it was basically like trying to play like like think of the way you struggled holding an N64 controller, but like I feel like I'm piloting a drag
Like
racer
a
holding
trash
this damn
can
thing.
lid.
It was awful. Um, but the biggest thing that the original Xbox controllers had that no controller has had was 6 face buttons. So back in the day, Xbox was always A, B, X, Y, just like you're used to. But then
Oh
right
yeah, yeah.
above X and Y, you had the black button and the Y button. And wouldn't you know it, those buttons were supposed to have functionality.
Black and white. You said why?
Black.
I just.
I said white.
Oh, it didn't come through. So yeah, black and
That's
white,
okay.
just in case
Black
you
and
know.
white. And the buttons were quite literally a black button and a white button, and they did things. And so they did things in this game. Now, I don't know how they were mapped. So in this game, playing it on Games Pass, it's left bumper, right bumper. But let me tell you, it was clearly supposed to have been intuitive, and that does not hold over well.
So did the OG Xbox only have triggers?
Yes, sure did. It sure did. So it only
Uh,
had triggers, and then YX or YB, XA, and then black and white were above them. So not only did you have this
okay.
monstrosity of a controller, but you had to reach above it in order to press those two buttons, or you had to like claw and hope that those controllers weren't necessary. Oh boy, there's that's fun for all you who don't know this. And so the game plays as though you're supposed to have a black and Y button at your disposal. And that's the game. Go, complete level, collect things, do it faster to get better scores, and your scores don't really mean much.
So collectathon.
And basically, but also suck and blow-a-thon with your sweet ass vacuum to save the ambiguous white woman as a little tabby cat.
Is the cat cute?
Welcome back to
Dude,
2001.
it was such a simpler time, man.
It was so simple,
It
man.
was
I
so
look, let me
simple.
the music in this game is somewhere between like a synthwave, like early E-Bombs World video that you would have watched if you then took that sound and put it in a microwave.
Do we got like bleeps and bloops?
Bleeps and bloops coming from the microwave with like the occasional sound like someone dropped a trash can lid and punted it out back. It's not a lot of care was put into this game. But
You're
I'll
doing
tell
it.
you what,
You're
man.
convincing me so hard.
It's for the novelty of what this game is. Honestly, just to remember, what this game does is it gives you this honestly perfect microcosm of what we grew up with and really how Microsoft started. Because I can honestly pretty safely and comfortably say that most first party developed Microsoft games run beautifully now. Really,
Mm-hmm.
even if we consider the disparity between what Bungie did with Halo and what Microsoft did with its own Blinx,
Right.
it's a staggering gap in just where knowledge was of where gaming and control schemes and programming was. That it's such an interesting like case study this game was to go back in and try to put yourself back in the mindset of how you used to be and how you approached games, that it was so interesting to do.
So I want to ask this because for those who are newer to gaming or you just
Mhm.
started with I'd say PS3 on because it
Mhm.
wasn't really as much on PS3 or 360. Did you happen to look up any cheat codes?
I did not.
I wonder if they
I did
exist.
not, and I considered it, but I just didn't. Because honestly, the game wasn't hard.
So, for those unaware, because they don't really exist anymore because of trophies and online components. Cheat codes were things that let you, like, typically it was button combinations. Some games had it built in where there was, like, you go to this menu and you type in a specific code. Cheat codes were things that altered the game. That gave you
Mhm.
unlimited ammo, infinite health, ultimate power ups. Sometimes it would like GoldenEye 64 had big head mode or things
Mhm.
like that that just made the game, honestly, kept the game going even after you
Mhm.
beat it, which was, I feel like, out of all game franchises that I still play that have that spirit, it's Resident Evil.
Mhm.
Because once you beat the game, you can unlock certain components of weapons, new weapons, unlimited ammo, things like that to alter a run through of the game. So
Mhm.
I think that kind of stopped after Xbox and PS2 because they met up with online components and trophy unlocking, and they didn't want that to be messed up with cheats and things. So I'd be curious to see what if the older games on Game Pass can still have cheat codes activated on them.
I'm sure they did. Um, I'm actually literally looking it up right now. There's glitches. I don't actually see any cheat codes. I see
But
glitches.
let's for our old heads up there. What site did you use to look up cheat codes, Darren?
Codemaster, I believe
Codemaster.
is what I used.
Okay, I
But
used
I was a big Game Shark guy though.
what? So that was a cheat engine, but were there certain
It's
websites where
true.
you were like, I like Sims 2 cheat code? Like, was there a site you went to like look up cheat codes for games? Because
I'm
I
pretty
remember
sure
mine.
Codemaster was, but I also think I used Game Informer.
I used Game Winners. Do you remember
Wow.
Game Winners?
Wow.
I know.
Oh
Game
my
Winners
goodness.
was a site that was just dedicated to cheat codes and things, and you could submit your own. And I remember submitting my own.
You know what else I used though?
What?
Early, once upon a time, there was a TV channel called G4,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and one of the best shows that was on G4 at the time was called Cheat.
Oh, I
And
remember
I
that. Yeah,
cannot for the life of me remember the guy who was the host. But he would just be on, and this predated, the trophies and whatnot.
yeah,
There would be some games where it would be more like walkthroughs. This is how you get through this. This is basically stuff you could find in a strategy guide that he would just explain for you. Because I remember there was a whole Final Fantasy X episode of it. Um, but they used to play codes that you could put into the game and what they would do and what they would get you. So like Grand Theft Auto 2, when you used to be able to drop in a tank from anywhere and have unlimited ammo for all the guns, man,
yeah.
cheat was it. It was
So
amazing.
I was a teenager, naturally. And before I got into the 2K series, I think I started picking up NBA 2K with 2K 8 or 9, which was what introduced me to being into basketball like I am now. But there was an older game, and just because I was a child, I was a naive prefrontal cortex teenager. I went on Game Winner and I submitted my own cheat. And my cheat was the fart cheat on NBA 2K. And 2K had a cheat menu where you could go and type in a certain phrase to unlock certain things in the game. My cheat code was if you went into the cheat menu and typed in fart, 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 that all the players would fart as they run up and down the court. Lo and behold, my cheat never made it in. I checked back that site every day to see if they put it in there, and it never made it. And I was so mad because I wanted somebody to type in fart, fart, fart into their NBA 2K game.
I could just imagine them replacing the shoe squeak sound completely.
Dude, wouldn't that have been so good?
Even better if they had like variations of it the whole way. You know what I
When
mean?
you hit the
So
turbo button, it just elongates the sound.
just like any good like fart soundboard, just for every step, just you get some guy in the background going, Picking out different sounds. That's heinous.
I know.
Diabolical work.
But
But anyway, yeah,
back to
play
Blinks.
it for the sake of the case study.
I do want to ask you,
Yeah.
how are the controls weird? Because you talked about how the black and white buttons were linked to something. What were they linked to that the RB LB buttons at the top like don't work for?
So they were linked to LB and RB is where the black and white buttons ended up being mapped
Right.
to, it felt like. And it feels like they just had simultaneous controls with the X button and the B button, I believe. So pretty much they were just duplicate inputs, I think. It's possible I didn't progress far enough into the game to get autonomous controls for each
Sure.
face button. It's very possible, but it was so odd to remember. Oh wait, there's a black and a white button.
Wait.
What do I do?
Oh wait. So the game with the tutorials was like press the black button to do this, and you're just like,
What
what?
tutorial?
Are you serious?
By
That
tutorial, you mean little thing that pops up and kind of tells you nebulously what to do? Yeah, that happened.
golly day, that's such a relic. Gaming is so different now.
I know. It's so interesting.
It's so different now.
It is. It honestly what it did. It felt like a game that I should have had an older brother teaching me how to play while I was playing it.
That's yeah, like
Is
Ocarina of
is
Time
really
for me.
how that game kind of felt. Like, think back to Super Nintendo, Super Mario World 2. Right? How did you learn how to use a Tanuki suit?
My brothers.
Right, because it
Now,
certainly doesn't tell you
the question:
anywhere.
how did they learn?
You got to know a guy. You learned it from a
there's
guy.
there's always a guy at the school playground who's like,
There's
"Hey,
always a guy.
I got fatalities for Mortal Kombat for you."
Look, it's that guy, but it was also the guy who was like, "Hey, did you know that if you press X 37 times on the pause menu, you
my
know
dad,
exactly what I'm talking about."
my dad
It
works
was
at Xbox. He told me.
oh man. Well, my cousin works for Nintendo, and he told me, "Did you know that you could get the guy to move in Viridian City before you actually complete any of the tutorials?" Oh, and did you know that if you talk to him enough times when he's laying on the ground, Mew appears in your party immediately? Like, guys,
I fell for so many of those, man.
so many. Did you know that the Mew glitch actually does exist, though? Like I did when I went back and replayed through on the Switch arcade Pokemon Yellow. I did, in fact, play through the whole game with a Mew that was legitimately caught through the Bellsprout glitch with Abra teleporting right as a trainer came out. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Game is
You
such a
can't.
different
I don't
time.
even know how that happened. How was Mew in the game? They didn't have distribution events. How was Mew there? And who figured that out? Who did it?
Oh, don't ask me. So, you talked about the music, you talked about the
Uh
controls, you
huh.
talked about
Uh
the
huh.
story. Is the story is because I want to talk about this for my game as well. But is your game just like, yo, you're in this world, freaking go, and then you
Mhm.
just go?
Mhm. It's possible that if I had progressed far enough, I would have gotten another random vocalized but non-vocalized cutscene to give the world some more depth. But I didn't get far enough for that to happen. So it's just here is world, or here is level, do the level. Here's your clear time. Oh, that clear time sucked. You should figure out how to do it faster. Next level.
It's almost, how were the worlds designed? Like, was it like, if you think of a comparable game? Like, are we looking at like Banjo Kazooie, like open world areas that
No,
led to,
no,
or
no,
was it
no.
like one map that just led you through?
Uh huh.
So
Very much on a rail.
like Crash Bandicoot
Um,
almost.
I not as expansive, not as long.
Hmm.
Really, I mean, we're looking at wow. Um,
Let's see how long it takes to beat Blinx the Time Sweeper. So according to how long to beat, Blinx the Time Sweeper is about 10.5 hours if you include main plus side quests. Or main plus
I
sides.
believe that. I believe that.
Okay.
And I'm sure most of that is figuring the controls out.
That's
No problem. Um,
the main story is 8 hours. The main plus sides is 10.5. So that 2.5 hours is just you trying to figure
yeah.
out what buttons do what.
Sides is figuring out what side of the controller you need to hold to be able to press the buttons in the order you need to figure out whether LB or RB is black or white.
You seem
Um,
so salty about that.
Look, man, it's not even it's really not salt. It is genuinely I struggle to reimagine how it was so genuinely and significantly because it just I remember playing the original Halo
Mm.
and thinking, "Wow, this is the future." Because at that point, my only other real first-person shooter comparison was GoldenEye. And from GoldenEye to Halo was just like they might as well have belonged in two different worlds.
What was the control scheme of Halo? What was it? How did you aim? Was it because
It was
Modern
still right
Warfare
stick,
was it?
unless you're asking about aim down sight. Are you asking aim down sight?
Yeah, ADS was
ADS is right.
revolutionized.
It was right stick,
That's right. But
but you
the
also couldn't do that with every weapon. You could only do it with weapons with scopes. So everything was hip fire, as I recall.
and so right stick was full camera control. Like your left stick
Full
was like
camera
forward,
control.
back, strafe,
Yep.
and then
Full camera control, and then right stick, like click, R3 equivalent. That was your ADS. And only for scoped weapons. So like the big one was the battle rifle in Halo 2. That was the one. Or like the
Ooh.
snipers that you could get. Right. Otherwise, hip fire the whole time.
Okay, so I
So like
mean,
yeah, Call of Duty is what really modernized the shooter paradigm for the control scheme. This game it just kind of took like normal gaming conventions and it almost feels like they had 6 buttons and 2 triggers and only really had 3 main functions of the game. Except eventually then your face buttons like each Y, X, and B would control pause, rewind, fast forward as your time functions
mm,
as you unlocked those through the things that you would collect on the map, basically your equivalent of your Mario coins, which did give you a little bit of agency as far as how to solve puzzles, ways that you could interact with combat a little bit differently. But I mean, it as a whole, I really still can't come up with a good this is what the levels reminded me of. I mean, like smaller Sly Cooper, way smaller,
no. Okay,
way smaller.
okay, all right, all
So I
right.
mean, the whole playing the game felt familiar,
Did you get to like a
but
boss fight of any kind?
I did not.
Do you think did the game feel like it would probably have boss fights? I'm assuming because it's levels and things,
Yeah, probably. That I imagine would force you to use the time affecting mechanics
right?
for sure. Um, how big the bites were, hard to say. But I have to imagine that there would have been to some degree because they painted this pirate crew out to be what you're dealing with. So why not?
Fair enough. I mean,
Look,
I
this game is if you want to really appreciate where we are, sometimes you need to take a step back and remember where we were. And
absolutely
this is about the purest encapsulation of where we were that I can ever possibly imagine. It was a perfect attempt at a new old video game.
I am the kind of person that my plan for my son is like he's not gonna just hop on PS5, PS6, whatever, and just be
Mhm.
like, oh, this is the new whatever. Like I genuinely want him to experience like where gaming was because and that's why I have all my old consoles. I have my Retron where I can play Genesis, Nintendo, Super Nintendo. I want to introduce him to those worlds so he can just familiarize himself. It's not as intense. It's not
Mm-hmm.
as convoluted as the two sticks and face buttons and shoulder. Like, it's, if you go back and play Super Mario 3, it is a joystick or a D-pad and two buttons. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I fully plan on having him work his way up through like eras of gaming, and maybe I'll give this one a shot to see if it's something that I'd want to introduce him to. I will have to say I'm not convinced that I want to play it for fun on my own time, like as a as a game.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I want to give this a shot to see if this is something I could introduce Micah to, maybe I'll do that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Oh no,
Speaking,
I guess the jury's out. Yeah, I hated it. I I hated it. I'm so we're so spoiled with how things are now. I When I say I didn't get to a boss fight, yeah, no, I promise. I cleared the first two stages, put it down, and couldn't pick it back up again. I uh-uh. Uh-uh. Microsoft, you've come a long way. Let's
just so you're aware, Blinx the Time Cat. I didn't want to tell you this. I think Blinx the Time Cat, like that character, is pretty known, like in the gaming zeitgeist of like, yeah, his games suck.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to tell you
It
that when you
did.
chose it. I didn't
It
want to tell
did.
you.
It was bad. I think what probably I got about 20 minutes into it.
That's
It
so
did
good.
not it did not get a full hour of my time, and I put the controller down and I looked at Haley and I went, "Wow. Uh this this sucks." And she looked back at me with just the most like sincere, pragmatic look on her face and said, "Well, then just don't play it." I'm like, "You don't understand. I have to." And she's
This is
like,
my job now.
"Okay. This is my life now. Playing potentially really bad or good games. This is the first one." It's funny because last week I talked about the first time that any of us have played a game that was actually played to completion. This one was not. And the funny thing is, they theoretically should have taken about the same amount of time.
Well, my game is Kameo Elements of Power by Rare. And it is a game where you play as a character named Kameo.
I was hoping it was going to be rare.
You play as a character named Kameo who is an elven warrior who can shapeshift into different elemental beasts. It was a launch title on the Xbox 360, and let me tell you something, man. So for those who've never done it before, when you open a Game Pass, a 360 game on Game Pass, it switches the operating system of the Xbox back to that console. So
The whole system?
you get the Xbox 360 startup and you see the UI. Like, it's not like you can't go through like the cards or anything, but like you see the UI. It does that where the your name pops up and it says you're online and it has the Xbox with the four rings around it. Like, it says, like, it does that little blink when you log onto it. It says you're online. The box pops up saying that there's no save data, and you have it's the 360 UI. And when
Pause. That same thing happened when I fired up Blinx. I got the OG Xbox startup screen
the
with that amorphous green blob. That
yeah.
was that was the most exciting part of the whole game.
Wait, you didn't sit on the main menu and enjoy the music? What do you mean?
The most exciting part of the whole game was the original Xbox turning on
But there was
noise.
something about seeing that 360 UI that just slingshotted me back to playing Modern Warfare and playing
Hmm.
Ghost Recon Future Soldier and playing Project Gotham and just playing those games and just a simpler time where I would play with two of my very close friends at the time who had never played Call of Duty, and I would school them. And I was a sniper in Call of Duty, and for those who've never played it, you could, when you're aiming down a sniper rifle, you can click in the stick and hold your breath, so you hear an audible. And my friends got to the point where I Pavloved them into hearing that sound and immediately holding the crouch button so they'd go into crawl mode. And it was just a great time. But this game starts up, and yes, you are capable of shape-shifting into different elemental beasts. It starts in a castle, and just like Blinx, this joint has like a 2-minute intro of like, this is who you are, this is what's happened, your family's been taken, go rescue them, and then it just starts gameplay, and you're just tossed into this freaking flaming castle, and you look in the top corner and you see the face buttons are assigned to a different form that you can shapeshift into. There's a ice yeti youngin that you can grab dudes and just toss them on your back and have them spiked on your ice spikes. There's an armadillo boulder youngin that can just zoom up walls. There's a plant dude that just boxes people in the face. And then you have your fairy that lets you just hover and she can fly a little bit. And so you're tossing this joint, and your job is get to the end of this castle with these abilities that we didn't teach you about. Granted, there are these floating little papers that you can interact with that tell you how to control the character, but if you don't touch those, you're just like, what do I do? There's a flaming castle in front of me. What am I supposed to do? The game does walk you through enough to the point where I understood it. But yes, you shapeshift into these beasts, and there are a total of 10 beasts that you can assign to your 3 face buttons. A is always Kameo, your main character, that you switch back to, but the 3 face buttons can be swapped out, and they're different elements. There's water, fire, things like that. And you get to the end of this first stage, and you get a score. You remember when playing a game, you got like level scores, just like you talked about with Blinx? Yeah, you got a score based on your performance in the level. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I thought I was just saving my family. I didn't know I could save them better. But you get to the end and you fight a boss, and you lose, and your family, you don't get your family because it's the first level, obviously. And you fall down a hole, and you awaken in this place called the Enchanted Kingdom, and that is your hub for the game. Where, and all your elemental beasts are gone. You only had 3, but they're all gone. So you start the game, and your job is to chase down these shadow creatures that have the different elements, and your job is to rescue these elements to put them in your Book of Whatnot, W-O-T-N-O-T, Book of Whatnot. And the Book of Whatnot is your pause menu. You can pause it, hit the right trigger. On the face of the book is this guy who you can press A when you pause it. He tells you, like, hey, you might want to try this, and gives you hints on how to progress through the game. You hit the right trigger to flip, and it's an encyclopedia of all the monsters. You flip again, and there's the elemental beast that you've unlocked that you can assign to the faces. You hit it again, and I don't know if this is just because it's on Rare Replay, because this was one of the games on Rare Replay, but there are costumes that you can change your character into. Some of them are not subtle. Like I said, you're playing as a female elf. Some of the outfits, not subtle. But you can switch your elemental beasts that you get. You can switch them into different costumes as well. So my personal favorite was this rock dude that you could switch the costume of. And his normal form is just like a head on just a bunch of rocks. The form that I had him on was his head sitting on top of a bunch of red goblin heads that just roll around with you, and he throws rocks. His attacks are literally the costume. So when you are not in costume, you throw it, it's a rock. When you have the goblin heads, his rock toss is a goblin head. And I'm like, that's freaking awesome that they put enough time into, like, your costume affects, granted it's flavor, it doesn't make it strong or anything, but it, like, you see your body being thrown. So the goal is to get all your elemental beasts back to eventually save all of your family. And the game moved very quickly. I got the first two elemental beasts. If I had just like beelined it and not searched through the level, which there are kind of purposes to searching through the level, I probably could have gotten the first two elemental beasts back in like 20 minutes. Like it is not a long game. I looked up how long to beat. Main plus sides is about 10 hours, like Blinx. Um, and it is very bright and colorful. The music feels very fantasy esque. It's right. It's not something I'm gonna go and listen to, but it's right. The game loads about as fast as Elden Ring. Granted, it is an Xbox 360 game being loaded on a Series X, so that makes sense. The frame rate is really nice. It feels fine to control, especially once you get used to it, because this was 360, so it didn't have to the black and white buttons and things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it feels like a lot of their other games. So, for those who don't know, Rare is the creator of Donkey Kong Country, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Banjo Kazooie, Viva Pinata, and Perfect Dark, GoldenEye 64. Rare was a company that could take a genre and revolutionize it. Like, they revolutionized first person shooters. That was my dog. They revolutionized platformers. They revolutionized everything they touched, and so this game feels a lot like those. Um, the creatures all feel unique. Like I said, the plant you have at the beginning is a boxer, so you hit the right triggers for him to jab, and then his special ability where you hit both triggers, the plant goes underground and lets you uppercut from the ground. The Yeti could grab and toss monsters on his back, and you could hurt them that way. So every creature had their own thing. The voice acting was super passable, especially for 2005. And this dog. Go.
Dog wants to
Go.
play Blinx the Time Sweeper.
She wants to play, but she wants to go chase that cat.
Chase that cat.
Um, Luna, I love you. But can you go? So yeah, I mean that's the gist. I think I ended up putting like it's been a pretty busy week. It's been a pretty
Exactly that busy.
it's been a pretty busy week. So like I think I got like 2 hours into it, not a ton, but with how long the game is, I got about a fifth of the way in. So um, it definitely is of its time, but like if you were looking for something fun to play, I think you could do worse than Kameo, to be honest.
Hmm. It sounds very similar to a PlayStation 2 game that for the life of me I cannot remember what it was, but you were like a skeleton knight in
Medi-
giant armor.
Medieval,
Maybe? That sounds right.
but that would have been no. Medieval was PlayStation 1. Uh,
Medieval 2?
maybe 2. Maybe.
But this sounds formulaically somewhat similar.
I mean, it feels of its time. Like, that's how Spyro was. Spyro was a giant
Sure.
collectathon where you had to go and get the gems and free your dragon friends. And Crash Bandicoot was a collectathon. You collected all the peaches and raced through the levels to beat your time. So, like, it is definitely of its time because this is. It was a genre in and of itself, for sure. Like, I don't know that Rare ever touched on certain genres like JRPG. Well, they're not Japanese. Is Rare Japanese? Rare might be Japanese. I don't actually know.
I think
Um,
so.
but like RPGs, I don't know that Rare truly touched on those. But Rare definitely had like collectathon platforming puzzle games. They had them down to a science for sure.
Sure. Sure.
So
I
that
mean, it's
is
definitely
Cameo.
interesting. It's definitely interesting. But a 360 launch title, I mean, maybe if I'm bored, it's hard to say. Um, I just want to go ahead and throw this out there though, just because
Oh,
I got a little curious. So
okay.
while you were talking, I did some looks on the reviews of Blinks the Time Sweeper. Oh, oh no! Please brace yourself. Pucker whatever hole needs puckered.
Okay, do tell.
Metacritic gave it a 71.
Oh, okay, okay.
Not that they're reputable, but they kind of were back then. IGN gave it an 8.8.
What did they say about it?
Game Zone gave it an 8.
What did they say about it? What's like the quote for it?
Hold
Blinx
on.
the Time Cat is the new mascot going forward for Microsoft, and they need to keep him safe at all costs.
Hold on, let me see if I can get you the quote.
The quote.
The quote. Um, okay, so admittedly, this review was posted on September 27th, 2002, and was apparently updated on November 23rd, 2018.
Okay.
Oh boy. Last sentence of the first paragraph. First sentence of the first paragraph. When word first hit about Artoon's Blinx, the time sweeper at E3, everyone's jaw dropped. No one had thought the Xbox hard drive would be used as anything but a storage unit, but Blinx takes advantage of the Xbox hardware. Acting like a TiVo, the hard drive records all of your gameplay. So,
Oh, I
so
mean
that's pretty neat.
that is pretty
That's pretty neat
impressive.
for the time. But here we are. How does it stand up to the classics like Mario and Crash Bandicoot? This much is certain. Blinx ushers in a new era of Xbox gaming, and that alone makes it worthy of applause. Are you convinced yet? Close credits.
All right, I'm curious. I'm curious. What do we got for what do we got for Cameo? How did Cameo do in comparison to your game? All right, so Cameo on Metacritic got a. If my computer wants to do me a favor and actually search for it, Cameo Elements of Power got a 79. Let's go. Let's go. 79. GameSpot. It's packed with clever and entertaining action, not to mention some of the most highly impressive, along with terrific music and sound. Let's go. I win.
You sure do, buddy. You sure do. So all that is to say, right? Let's convince me to go back. I think what we've learned, at least for these first two entries, these may have been games that were super fun at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Are we necessarily convinced to go back and experience some of these games that we potentially wanted to play and didn't? These, I think, were two probably really bad examples.
What do you mean? You don't want to go shapeshift into beasts?
No.
How dare you?
And that's okay. Because you know what? I bet if I had played that game in 2006, I would have had a great time.
You would have. You would have had an 89 out of 100 great time. Or
I mean,
79 out
whatever
of
that
100.
means. Whatever that means.
So that concludes our convincing segment. I think neither of us are convinced, which is a shame. But hey, there had to be an episode where we weren't convinced, right? Because we've been fairly convinced so far.
It's true. To be quite frank, this is the first game that I've played relative to this that I just outright don't like. And it had to happen eventually, you know? I did my best. I was hoping the novelty of it would be enough to convince you, but sometimes you can't hide your own disdain.
Convince Me Nostalgia will be a very interesting episode. But
Yes, it will.
moving on to the whatever segment, there was a game that stood out to me. Its trailer released a couple days ago. For those who don't know about me, I'm big into horror games. I like horror games. Darren does not. But some of my favorite games are like Resi 2, 3, 4 remakes. I've beat Resident Evil 7 and 8. I've beaten Resident Evil 8 like 7 times. Silent Hill 2, had a blast with it. Darren watched me play some of it. And it's a genre that I really, really like. There was a
And he
trailer that came
loves
out.
and he loves fear. And also cold fear.
There's this trailer that came out for a game called Dark Mass. Now, I have pretty severe thalassophobia. For those who don't know what that means, I'm terrified of things underwater. And Dark Mass is a game that is coming out, PS5. I'm not sure what else. The conceit of this game is that you play a diver, off to a fantastic start so far. And
Hate
on a
it.
diving expedition with a friend of yours, you go under this lake or this pond. I don't know what it is. I think it's a lake, and you see that there is a not perfectly, but a preserved manor sitting under the water in this lake. And you go and you explore this house, and it is a claustrophobic, psychological survival horror where the entire game takes place underwater inside this manor. And it is the first horror game where I've looked at the trailer for and gone, no.
So my first question, why would they look in the house?
If you saw a preserved house under a whole lake and you were a diver, you'd be kind of interested to be like, how did this happen?
No,
People,
because I have an incredibly healthy sense of self-preservation.
it would be no different than exploring like a sunken ship. It's
Yeah, I
the
bet I
same
wouldn't do
idea.
that either.
No,
Promise I wouldn't do that
you
either.
wouldn't, but
Yeah,
divers
right.
do it.
Yeah, well.
People travel to like the Bahamas and these other beaches and do that for fun. They pay money to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, but they pay to explore things that people have already explored.
Somebody has to explore it for the first time.
Yeah, but those aren't the people paying for it.
That's true. That's true.
Them the folk without a healthy sense of self-preservation or the wherewithal to think, man, if something goes wrong, thank God I'm hundreds of feet underwater.
Yeah, so I saw that trailer and it shook me because it combines like the idea of it, like the horrors that you can throw at players underwater. Oh my gosh. Like I've tried Subnautica, can't do it. Can't do it. No thanks. I got to the shallows, and then the moment I had the ability to go deeper, I said, I'm out. I'm good. I'll pass. But Subnautica is a bit of a smaller game. Dark Mass, I think, is indie. I didn't see who the developer was. But it makes me think about smaller games. And there was a quote that the director, I believe it was the director for Team Asobi, who made Astrobot, had a quote. And it was a magnificent quote because it's so simple. He said to devs, he told devs that it's okay to make smaller games. And I think a lot of companies need to hear that. A lot of companies need to hear that, man.
Yep. Whole time.
And
I love the 60 plus hour adventure as much as the next guy. Um but a lot of the times those games like you've talked about quite a bit at this point, those games just turn into giant checklists.
yeah,
And there nobody has truly found that like really happy medium between this is a checklist, but also I feel like everything I'm doing is worth my time to do.
there has been that released 3 years ago. 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Elden Ring.
Well, there wasn't a true checklist though, because you never got to keep an eye on your tasks.
You're saying a game with like landmarks and things to do
Yeah,
that doesn't. Yeah,
a
yeah,
game
yeah.
that
Okay.
tells you that you have things to do without overstaying its welcome for how long it takes you to do them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of make your world. At this point with technology, no one cares how big your world is. It's
Hmm.
not a bragging point to have a big world anymore because let's be honest, no one is ever going to beat Daggerfall. No one is ever going to be bigger than Daggerfall. So we don't care about the size. Do you know how big Daggerfall's world is? Have you ever looked it up?
Isn't it like, isn't it like four Skyrims? or something like that.
You're hilarious. Daggerfall is approximately 209,000 square kilometers.
Oh, yeah, that's like at least four.
So no one cares about the size of the world. Make your world smaller and fill it with stuff. Perfect example,
Yes.
if you had just taken Starfield and the Bethesda just being like, we're going to procedurally generate all these planets, that's cool. But your issue is that within the first two worlds that I explored, I already saw stuff that repeated.
Yep.
Two worlds, man. Give
Yep.
me Give me two or three handcrafted planets. I'm in. Two or three
Mhm.
handcrafted planets is all we need.
Mhm.
Size
Like,
doesn't mean anything
do you
anymore.
remember? Do you remember? I guess Star Ocean games through First Departure, so through Mr. Edge Maverick's game,
Yeah.
right? We had three, maybe four planets, but the where you could interact fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
And now, granted, those weren't open world per se, as we are used to it now, but like open zone with pretty firm boundaries, more linear, I suppose, more in the vein of like your Final Fantasy 10 through 13.
Sure.
But that was enough. That
So
was enough. I love the ability to interact with the world around you, a la Breath of the Wild. I do love that. But at Breath of the Wild, there is a chance that everywhere you go, you could find something.
I am of the mind, this may be a hot take, I don't know. I'm of the mind that honestly Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom probably could have afforded it to be just a little bit smaller.
I could agree with that.
And I only say that because Tears of the Kingdom was not only the main world, it was the sky area, and you had an entire underground that was literally the exact same size as the map above, and the main world was gigantic.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going to explore the entire underworld and not get overwhelmed and burnt out from all the exploring that you're going to do down there.
Unless you go through a breakup that requires a 300-hour adventure. Um,
But
that never happened to either of us, I'm sure. So that's fine. But all that is to say is your world just has to feel lived in. I still to this day, the turning point for me in my pretty blind, like sweeping love of open world games was Far Cry 5 because that map was huge and empty.
that's what a lot of open world games are, man. Like the developers are so focused. Granted, I don't know what the developers are actually focused on, but maybe they're being told to do this. I don't know. But it seems like a
Hmm.
lot of them are so focused on like, look at how big our world is and how beautiful it is. That's great. That
Hmm.
is a lot of time and effort, and you should definitely genuinely be proud of the work that you did. But when it takes me 10 minutes of running to get from one point to the next of any interest, and there's literally nothing in between, and you don't give me a frickin' rover, or the
Hmm.
fact that my run only lasts 5 seconds, I'm looking at you, Starfield.
Hmm.
I don't want that. I don't want that.
And it's
But
funny.
go
It's
ahead.
funny to go back to open world games because now we absolutely have to talk about Assassin's Creed Shadows
Yeah, what
because it's just
what's going
it's
on?
okay. I I have waited for a very long time for feudal Japan in an Assassin's Creed game because I think that the setting is perfect. And it was perfect when we got Ghost of Tsushima. That was the perfect setting for that exact game.
Yep.
And now here comes Ubisoft stamping the words Assassin's Creed on feudal Japan.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when you get to a place where even the prime minister of Japan has now decried an entire studio and asked, "Why is it that you made a game about our country if you hate our country so much and couldn't keep our culture accurate?" I'm I'm appalled at the fact that that's the case because this is not an absurd thing to say. Feudal Japan is probably the one setting in history outside of maybe World War II with like the most source material that you could reference for like cultural moments and the way people interacted. I mean, you could look at any anime and you could pull a lot of very interesting information from it relative to its depiction of feudal or feudal adjacent Japan culture. Like look at
Yeah.
Rurouni Kenshin, for example. It's like the perfect thing. And they just are remaking it right now. And you mean to tell me that a AAA studio with quadruple A budget can't figure out how to break its own head out of its own butt to put together something that's both culturally appropriate and something people want to play? Because right now they've done neither.
It's
And yet
it
somehow this is the most successful and most concurrent players of any Assassin's Creed game ever.
And the worst part is that it is so genuinely, even after all the games we have, it's still untapped, I feel like. Like, feudal
Yes.
Japan is still
Yes.
really untapped in video games. There are tons of areas that are untapped, tons of time periods and eras. Like, you don't see
Hmm.
World War One much anymore. Like, Civil War, like, that could be touched on. The Industrial Revolution. There's so much cool stuff that you can touch on. Like, and fun fact, I think Assassin's Creed Syndicate was the Industrial Revolution. But Assassin's Creed is a perfect vehicle to tackle
Hmm.
so many different areas. It's built into the game, and
Hmm.
you screw it up. You screw.
They could have just slapped the Assassin's Creed logo over Ghost of Tsushima, and people probably wouldn't have been as mad.
Yeah,
I mean, people would have been mad, but like different mad, because at least
because
then we would have got a good game.
yeah, I
And
mean
yet
it's
somehow this this is their most successful Assassin's Creed ever.
you know why? Because of the time period. It's what people have been
Right.
clamoring for. So they finally do it, and people are gonna buy it because it's what they're clamoring for. That's it. That is the pull that feudal Japan has. Like, oh, it's in feudal Japan, I'm buying it. People are.
And I wanted to for that exact reason.
Now you just go back and
And I'm
get
so sad.
PS Plus, and you just play Ghost of Tsushima, and then wait for Ghost
I
of
mean, I
Yotei to
still
come out.
I still own the disc, so I can just play it that way, but it's just
Just wait. Just you got
I
to
just
beat it
don't
before Ghost
know.
of Yotei comes out.
It's true. If for no other reason than to play the upscaled version.
I haven't beaten Ghost of Tsushima yet. I got really far in it, and
Mm,
I stopped. I
same.
think maybe Ghost of Tsushima is that middle ground we're looking for, where like there's stuff to do, but
Maybe.
it's not. You know, but it's
Yeah.
the one thing that I will say that out of all game openings that I've ever played, I think Ghost of Tsushima has probably one of the best openings I've ever seen in a video game. For those who
Hard to
don't
argue.
know, it's like you're riding on your horse and it's just this beautiful scenery. I think it went. Does it go in? Did it go black and white during that
Yeah.
scene? And you see like sakura blossoms, and it's just so freaking cool. It's so cinematic, and all Ubisoft had to do is just be like, "Hey, that's cool. Let's try and do that." But no, but to be completely transparent, I don't even know what like the backlash is really about. But if the who was it, Minister of Japan, or
Prime
the
Minister.
Prime Minister, if he's coming at you, then something went wrong. And game companies are they're so Ashley Birch, who is of Hey Ash, What You Playing fame, and the show Mythic Quest, and is the voice of Aloy from the Horizon duology, I guess at this point. Um,
And
oh, Tiny Tina, yeah,
thank you.
Tiny
Carry
Tina from
on.
Borderlands 2 specifically, not the movie. Um,
What
uh,
what movie? That
put
didn't happen.
she put out a call to action and a video essay, I guess, about the danger of AI in games. So what happened was Guerrilla Games, who is the developer behind Horizon, they put out a video of a tech demo where one of the developers, I don't know who it was talking to Aloy, and Aloy was responding back in real time. But the issue was that it was Aloy's model with a robotic voice, and the face was like matching the words, but it was kind of glitchy. So it wasn't. It was a tech demo, really. But she had an issue because this could potentially lead towards, because there's no laws or anything about it, where developers could attempt to just cut out voice actors. And apparently, voice actors, SAG-AFTRA Foundation is on strike right now to get certain things put in place for AI voice acting. But even if it was archaic, the level of AI that was being used, they did say that there is nothing in the works. There is no Horizon game in the works. They're not using this for anything. It was just a tech demo. But the idea that this is something that you would even potentially use for what? What are you shooting for? Like, what's your goal? Like, the only thing I can think this would be used for is RPGs where you truly want to make it so characters can do whatever they want and NPCs can respond in kind.
Yeah.
Like a game where you can't have set dialogue because players can truly do whatever they want. That is, I think that might be the next gaming evolution, is true RNG content where the NPCs can react to every single thing you do. But I don't know that that's what developers want to use it for.
Yeah. I mean, I there has to be an implicit degree of cynicism to it. Like everybody wants to distract you with like smiles and flowers while the hand behind the back holds the dagger, right? It- I
Yeah.
can't I can't see what else they'd use it for if not to be able to implement it. And I love AI. I think AI is a super cool thing.
It is a tool.
I think it is in fact a tool,
That's it. Right.
but the contributions of a high quality voice actor or actress, what they bring to a game is something that you can't simulate. I mean, and even if they can, why would you want to? Part of what makes gaming so universal is its ability to draw in and connect with the player and make them feel
Mm-hmm.
like they're a part of the world. Do you honestly mean to tell me that you think that AI can do that the same way that somebody like Matt Mercer can pull you into a story?
If you knew that the NPC you were talking to was an AI NPC, that like the person speaking was not in the studio, that it was that it is a falsified voice, I don't think I'd care. I don't think I'd care that they asked me to save their child that was stolen from them. I don't think I'd care that they have a long lost family heirloom, because that matters to me. It's why I like D&D.
Hmm.
If I had the option of having a real person running in my campaign versus an AI bot, granted the AI bot has tons of ideas and they could respond to whatever I do. That's fantastic. But D&D and is more than just let me go cast magic and kill this person. It is a community, it is a connection, and AI voice acting or AI generation of any sort in gaming kind of dampens that. Now, do I think AI could be used to make game developing easier? If it's used the right way, yeah. It's the
Hmm.
same thing as any tool.
But the thing with that is, I mean, then how many jobs are we losing again? You know,
I I think
if we
from
automate things to that point, we're taking away the human touch. And while we as a consumer might get I don't know, a faster product that may be a little more clean and more complete, people are going to lose jobs for that because an AI works 24 hours a day.
well the only issue that you could potentially run into though with AI in that way is that AI can't create new things. It is incapable of creating anything new. And if you get into
Sure.
coding, like you need the human touch to think outside the box. AI can only do what it's trained to do.
That's true. But
So
if you get
that's
one person who can come up with the code, and then the AI can refine it.
Yeah. So are
Who's
you
to
are are
say?
you saying that you're fairly like anti AI period in game
No,
development, or
no, I think it's got to have a time and a place, but it can't be at the expense of jobs.
I agree with that. I
It
absolutely
should
agree
be
with
a
that.
tool that people get trained to use rather than a tool that replaces people.
I agree with that. And with that, I do wanna. I don't want us to ramble too much, but I do wanna leave with this medium is it matters to a lot of people,
Mhm.
and we want to make sure that we are even no matter how big or small the audience is, we're doing our part to try and preserve it because it's something we do care about. And yeah, I guess we'll see if anything develops. We'll see how the strike goes, and if
Mhm.
Ashley Birch is her name. I can't remember if I said last name, but yes, she is passionate for sure as well. And I've been following her for as long as I can remember since the Hey Ash What You Playing days. But um, yeah, with that said, that is our episode. Coming up next time, I will be playing a new game along with Darren. Darren, what are we going to be doing next time?
We're going back to our old classic format now. Normal convincing. So I will be playing the Little Gator game, which was developed by Mega Wobble and published by Platonic Friends. They are known predominantly for producing the ukulele games,
Banjo
which
Kazooie,
I never got a chance to
spiritual
play,
successor. Yeah.
but yeah, exactly so. They seemed like a really fun, modern, rare-esque game, which didn't really think about that considering the games you played today, but here we are.
I will be doing Ghostwire Tokyo by the now sadly defunct Tango Gameworks, who are responsible for games like Evil Within 1 and 2 and Hi-Fi Rush.
Hi-Fi Rush is, of course, a great game
It
and
is also
deserved better than it got, and deserves the sequel we'll never see.
and it is also on Game Pass. And with that
It
said,
is. Play it.
keep an eye out in the coming weeks. Darren and I did a guest appearance on a podcast earlier, and it's potential that we may have our first guest. We don't know for sure yet. We're still trying to work it out, but we do have a Convince Me versus coming up in the future where Darren and I will be attempting to convince one person to choose our game of the week, and they will have to pick one of them. And for those wondering, we will absolutely be keeping score on who has convinced more people 100%.
Which just
The
means
issue,
we will have to search for people who don't have implicit bias.
I mean, you're flowery with your words, so you'll probably be better at convincing than I will.
Yeah,
I'm like a bull charging through. I'm just like, "Hey, play this game." So,
but I still probably can't convince your wife of anything. So we'll keep it green, we'll keep it even.
you'd be surprised. But with that said, thank you for listening, and we're appreciative of your time and your attention. Please follow us, Convince Me Gaming at Spotify, Convince Me Podcast on Reddit, Convince Me Media on YouTube and Instagram. And with that said, are you convinced yet? Adios.